Yes.
In the legal entertainment space, she's become a force to be reckoned with. Keisha Perry is the head of the Perry Law Group, and it is an organization that she's fostered where she's been able to make a huge difference in the entertainment law arena, representing a host of production companies, producers, directors, and digital influencers and artists. And she sits down with us today in the Jenleeion Circle to talk about that. First, I want to say, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm very excited. I'm very interested in speaking with you for several reasons. One being, as a child, the legal arena, I was obsessed with it. And everybody thought I was on target to become a lawyer. I still might do that. I'm not sure. But I'm still thinking about doing so. But and then when you marriage that with entertainment, right, which is a large part of what my life is, I find your story extremely interesting. So as I do with everyone that joins the Jenleeion Circle, I want to go back to the beginning. What gave you the nerve to get into the legal world?
Well, for me as a kid, I always had the gift of gab. Always.
That's where it starts. Right?
It does. You know, the inquisitive mind, researching, always having 1,000,001 questions. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And my grandmother would always tell me, you talk so much and you ask so many questions, you should be an attorney. And, you know, if you hear something enough times, it begins to stick.
Yeah.
So I began doing research. I was like, oh, okay, I like the earning potential of this field.
Could be lucrative.
And so that's what gave me the bug to be an attorney. I always envisioned that I would be a corporate attorney, but when I was in college at University of Tennessee, I was there with a lot of classmates that were going pro in the NFL. But I noticed a lot of them were not protected. They didn't have the right guidance, the right counsel. So I thought that I was going to do sports and entertainment, but the sports piece fell off and the entertainment stuck. So that was kind of my foray. And initially I thought that I would move to LA after law school, but Atlanta became home, and I'm glad it did.
Wow, and so in terms of your scholastic journey, the schools that you attended in your law journey, which schools did you attend to?
So I went to University of Tennessee for undergrad and law school. So I stayed.
For both?
Yes, I stayed. Persistence is something that's very important. And I made the decision to only apply to one law school, and that was University of Tennessee.
Wow.
And after I made that decision, I was like, oh, snap, like, I really got to get in. So I began to pester the people at admissions, and I always say I think that they let me in because they were tired of me being over there, but I fostered a relationship with the people in the admissions office, so much so that I got a call one day from Miss Janet, and she was like, I need you to come over here. And I was like, oh gosh. I was like, the only reason that she's telling me to come into the office is because she wants to gently let me down. But she wanted to hand deliver my acceptance letter.
Oh wow.
And this was back before cell phones, and she also told me, go ahead and call your mom and let her know that you got into law school. So that was it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because that resonates me with, well, because I another person with a gift of gab, I took the same gamble. George Mason University in Virginia was the only school I applied to. And so you say to yourself, I'm going to work this admissions process from every angle possible.
Exactly.
Because y'all are not going to say no to me. Now, I asked this question before I get to your professional experience and the work that you've been doing so far. In the context of law school, I have very respected lawyers that, were about 10, 25 years my senior. When I told them that I was toiling with the idea of going back to law school, they told me that they wouldn't do it today and that it wouldn't be worth it today. Your thoughts on that?
I think it really depends on what it is that you want to do. Just like with everything, inflation plays a role. So You know, I even think about myself. When I came out of law school, I came out with debt around $30,000, but that was only because I didn't work. And I lived off of $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
But when I hear people who are coming out of school now and they're coming out with upwards of $100,000 in debt, it's something to take pause as to what is it that you really want to do with your law degree. And with a law degree, without even being licensed, there's a lot that you can do with it. But I guess it's really a personal preference. Even if someone had told me, oh, you know, I wouldn't advise going to law school. It was a dream of mine. It was a goal. So I don't know if I would have been deterred just by somebody else not recommending it.
Right. So the context of the marriage between, you know, corporate law and entertainment law, and where you've been with the artist representation, the brand representation for production companies, etc. They're similar worlds, but it's a lot different, right? You've been in a seat to represent companies, and I expect to be able to foster deals based on what I have seen, right? Take me to the heart of your work with both artists and then the production companies that you represent.
So essentially, I'm a deal maker. Contract review, revision, negotiation, strategy, consulting, all of that is what I do. Anything except go into the courtroom. Not interested in litigating. You know, they always say attorneys' jobs are twofold. We either prevent messes or we clean them up. The deal prevents it. Cleanup is the litigation side. When I was in law school, I did mock trial and all of that, and I always hated having to be in front of the court. So I knew that that was not an area for me. But a lot of what I feel like I do is structuring and strategy for clients. And that can be anything from their business to a movie deal or a recording deal or a publishing deal. I'm the person that is going line by line through the contract to make sure that what has been agreed upon is actually what's on those pages. And what needs to be there, if it's not there, to make sure that it's added and make sure that my client understands all of the above.
How deep do you go in terms of whether or not it's, you know, worthwhile for the client, or do you leave that to the managerial piece of it and you're just legalistically interested in what's presented in front of you or what's not presented in front of you that needs to be there?
Well, I take more of a holistic approach to representation. So I do have the deep dive conversations with my clients. What is the impact of the deal that you are entering into, long and short term? Because the thing about the entertainment industry is you have a lot of people that they come into money very quickly, right? So with that being the case, they may be looking at the dollar amount that's on the paper, but they may not necessarily understand how long that money lasts in conjunction with what they're obligated to do and the term that those rights are given. So I'm very much so explaining to them the pros and the cons, how it impacts them, what they are and are not able to do. And a lot of those conversations I'm doing sometimes in conjunction with management and agents, and sometimes I'm doing it independent.
So you are able to say, or do you go far enough, or is it a toe step if you were to say, no, you're being lowballed?
Oh yes, we have those conversations all the time. You know, because a big part of my job also is knowing what's industry standard too. So I need to have the ability to say to a client, like, this is below industry standard, or, you know, even when it comes to dealing with influencers, right? This is a newer space, but I also understand with the number of followers that they may have, or with the number of followers, the subscribers, with the representation, the leverage, I absolutely have the conversation like, no, this is lowball, you should be at a higher rate, or this is a pretty good offer for where you are. The conversation has to happen on both sides.
And so with you sort of staying away from litigation, is that to suggest that you've never participated in any cleanup outfit?
Oh, never. That's just an area of law that I've never been interested in. Not since law school. I've always been on the transactional side.
But I mean, it's never fallen on your desk incidentally where someone might have been gone through a lawsuit or at least I guess even at a threat juncture. You never had to deal with any of that or wanted to deal with any of that.
I do, and normally I have a list of colleagues that I call when that happens, and then I ask my clients and slide it to the left, and I bring those clients in order to say, like, hey, this is beyond my wheelhouse. Now I have to refer you to a litigator.
What steadies you, Keisha, in your personal life? How do you balance all of the work with being an attorney to staying sane?
My family and my friends. That's my release. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old who are hilarious and funny and all the things that you would imagine for kids at that age. I am still the person that needs my community around me in order to make sure that ultimately I am and I can continue to be who I am. Another thing is travel. My husband and I enjoy travel, whether that is in the state, but primarily we love going international. The end of last year, we took our kids to Thailand. And that was an amazing trip, so much so that my 4-year-old was like, "Can we move here? Let's just go." And with me,
to hell with the U.S.
Exactly. And I'm like, I don't know that it's such a bad idea.
Yeah, is the 4-year-old a boy or a girl?
He's the boy.
And the 6-year-old is a girl?
Yes.
Well, that's fantastic. Can we move here? And you say, you know what? I kind of wish life could just be a vacation the whole time.
And depending on what project I'm working on, I agree with him. Depending on which project.
Now, I know for me, even when I, first entered into, contracts with the speaking bureau or anything that I may have done, I didn't consult an entertainment lawyer at first because I thought I knew it all, right? Or even just that, if I'd had an entertainment lawyer, the first time I was independent, the first speaking contract came to me, and they said, well, it was Gulfstream Aerospace, and they said, well, how much do you need for this event, right? It's going to be an event for student leadership, and it's a huge event in Savannah, Georgia. And I said, oh, or something like that. I guess, I guess I should charge them $500 or $1,000. And it was a lawyer friend who, someone, put me on the phone with and said, well, Chuck says that you should do this. And I scoffed at what he said and said, he's out of his mind. They're not going to pay me that. So I ended up putting that in the contract, asking for what Chuck told me to say, and they paid it with no problem. And I'm like, this is a world that I know nothing about. Mm-hmm. So I give that example to ask this following question, right? For those individuals who are hoping to get into entertainment, right, they're at the start of it. If you were to give 3 words of advice, right, obviously notwithstanding the fact that consult an entertainment lawyer, I got that part, but 3 words of advice that you would want them to consider when it comes to things like this, what would Keisha say?
The first is do research, because the hard thing is you don't know what you don't know, right? But we live in a society and in an age where Google, the internet, is amazing. Now, just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true, but it's a foundation. So doing research is very important. The second thing is use resources. The same way that you were able to call a friend so that friend could tell Chuck and Chuck could then tell you what to put in a contract, you use your resources. So you didn't know, but you got the answer, one that was beneficial to you by using your resources. And then the last thing is instinct. Follow your instinct, because sometimes when it comes to a new venture or a deal or whatever the case may be, there are moments that you're kind of like, something is off here, or, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't know about the price, or I don't know about what they're asking in terms of this deal. follow your instincts. Those would be my 3 outside of talk to an attorney.
I think that's fantastic. So research, use resources, and obviously use your instincts, be instinctual about it. Mm-hmm. Now, how different, is it a formulaic language when it comes to entertainment law, or are there some huge nuances that exist between the various disciplines in entertainment, say from sports to, or you're dealing with movies, you're dealing with an artist, that sort of thing. Are there some nuances that were difficult to deal with?
Absolutely. A lot of times people incorrectly assume that an attorney is an attorney and an attorney can practice in any area, and that's just not true. For example, I practice on the corporate side, so I do entity formations, I do operating agreements, bylaws, but I would never touch a merger and acquisition because that's outside of my wheelhouse.
I see.
A lot of times there are specialized terminology that may mean one thing in one practice area, but it has a totally different meaning in another practice area. Entertainment is one such area, right? So you can look at something like, I'll take a term like right of first refusal, right? If I am dealing with right of first refusal with a writer, that may be so that they can write the sequel. If I'm dealing with that with a producer or production company, that may be indicative of them having the right to actually produce the film. So all of these areas and elements, they have different terms of art, but they mean different things. So it's very nuanced, and understanding that, or having an attorney that understands that, is the difference in your contract actually reflecting what you think it should, or that it actually should, versus you having a real estate contract when you should have a production contract.
Wow, I see. And so with that being said, it's interesting that, a lot of attorneys, they may work for other people for a while, and then eventually they might want to try to do a private practice, but obviously private practice, takes a lot. You have to get the clientele, and that may take time. What do you think was the catalyst for you that made PLG successful?
Well, I think persistence, because it didn't, like most things, it didn't start successful. I didn't start with a clientele. I used real estate law in order to pay the bills while I built my entertainment clientele.
I see.
It was one of those things that I was very determined for my business to be successful, but it took a lot of preparation and a lot of sacrifice. A lot of times people will look and they're like, oh, you live this life where you travel and you do all of these things, but they didn't see the countless hours that were put in before. They didn't see where, I lived off of a very modest budget when my firm was, first being built, in order for me to be able to reap those benefits today. But the other thing was the ability and the freedom to ultimately be able to say, like, yes, I either want to work with this client or I don't. I'm not in a position now where anybody tells me, like, you have to work with a client or you have to do something that you don't want to do. Like I said, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. If Callie or Caden are in a school play or a spelling bee, there's no one that's telling me, like, no, you can't go and see your kid, or you can't be there for them because of X, Y, and Z. I command my schedule, but that also means that I command my schedule, but I also may be up some nights until 12, 1 o'clock because I still have a deadline and a contract to get out for a client. It's all about sacrifices and moving the pieces of the pie to make it fit what you need it to fit at that moment.
Absolutely. So how long, if you were to, I guess, place a time period on it, how long was this bridge of time between build and at the point you could say, well, PLG is successful?
I probably would say that period was probably 3-year ramp up. A 3-year ramp up where I felt as though there was the breathing room, and I did not feel as though everything was check to check, or it was not, oh man, what happens if this client goes? I would say it was a period of 3 years that it took me to get to the place that I could breathe, to feel like I was coasting a little bit more. That was probably 5 to 7 years, and this year I am 18 years in.
So I asked this because you've done things with many major companies, Google to be one of them, at least deals that have involved them. Was there, and obviously, if you're not privileged to say the name, I'm not asking for the name if you can't say it, but I'm just curious as to, because I love the success story of it. What was the aha moment where you specifically felt work done, dream come true?
I think that after, probably I would say when I got to the point that I felt like I was no longer on the check to check or client to client matter, I felt successful because even though entrepreneurship was in my family, when I had told my family, a year after law school that I was going to start my own business, a lot of them were afraid for me. So much so that, I had family members that sent me jobs. They'd be like, you might want to apply for this. USA Jobs is hiring, here's a good position. USA Jobs, federal gov site, and at first, it was tempting, right? Because just to back up, when I came out of law school, I worked for a small it was a mid-sized debt collection firm. I hated the work there. I 100% hated it.
You weren't one of the people who had to say, this call is to collect the debt and any information we
That was the other side of the building.
Okay.
My job was to make sure that they were in compliance with the laws of the states for the residents that they were calling into. But one thing that I hated about that job was, again, lack of knowledge got a lot of people. Because what a lot of people don't realize in the debt field is when companies go in and buy and sell debt, a lot of times the statute of limitations has run. Well, if the statute of limitations has run, they have no right to collect. However, when they get you on the phone and they say, okay, well, we'll just take whatever you got. Can you pay $1? Can you pay $5? When you pay that $5, you just started a new contract. So when you do that, now the statute of limitations resets. So now they have the right to go and collect when they may not have. So my job was to make sure what was the threshold of that collection? How did that have to be done? How did they enter into the different states for their portfolio? Long story short, I hated it. It wasn't what I wanted to do. However, I got comfortable with the paycheck. God had been dealing with me because I was like, I'm ready to go. But I was afraid. The paralysis of fear stepped in, and so I was like, okay, well, once I save this amount of money, or once I do this, or once I do that, and ultimately I got fired. And God closed the door so another one could be open, and that was the best firing of my life. Like, that opened the door for me to start my firm. But of course, in starting it, I was scared. So there was the temptation to go back to the steady paycheck when my family members would send me jobs. But ultimately, I was like, you know what? I'm on this path. So that success moment when I was able to say, hey, I can do this. And I remember being back home in Memphis, and I was able to take my whole family out to dinner, and I could afford to pay the bill. And I was like,
God, that feels good.
Yes. I was like, and this is sponsored by the Perry Law Group.
This is sponsored by the Perry Law Group.
Yes.
Legally, I can write it up.
That part. Tax season.
Hugely important. And I won't tell my kids that their birthday expenses are tax write-offs. But that's amazing. So what does your family think now?
Oh, now they're very proud. They're very proud, and they understand, the sacrifices and the persistence. This is what it was for.
And you said God was dealing with you, so you are a person of faith.
I am.
How big is your faith, and what's the biggest role that it plays in your life as you work through the confines of Hollywood? My goodness.
It's everything. I know that I am because he is. And there are doors that have been opened, opportunities that have been granted, and even spotlights that have been shown that but for him, I know that it would not have happened. Spotlights
that have been shown, but for him, would not have happened. That is powerful for me. Tell our audience where they can follow you.
So my Instagram is at Keisha Perry ESQ. The same for Twitter. My firm's website is www.perrylawgroup.com.
perrylawgroup.com. I am so thankful to have met you. This has been an enlightening discussion, especially for an arena that I've teased with and sometimes wonder. I went and got a degree in journalism, though, which still allows you to exercise the gift of gab that we talked about parenthetically at the start of the call, at the start of the interview. But I appreciate it. Please check out Jenleeion.com and our social media platforms to see the images that Keisha took. She was gracious enough to grace our cover, and we are very excited to have been able to celebrate her and women doing powerful things. Thank you, everybody. I'm Mario Bonds.
Does anyone still believe in Paris?